The most interesting game for our FPL teams this game week is in West London. It pits the fourth highest scoring defender against the 11th highest scoring defender, and they're both in my FPL team. It's Chelsea versus Brentford. In this video, we'll take a look at the top assets from a goalkeeping, defense, midfield, and forward position at both clubs and see which team you should be investing in. And we'll also take a look at what's going on at Manchester United as we prepare for the second Manchester derby this game week. Welcome to my channel. I'm your host, Femi. Let's jump into it. So we move into this game week after the FA Cup fixtures that have happened. I'm recording this just before we learn about the draw and the results of that draw. You may know that by the time this video comes out. And we also are in a game week where there's going to be League Cup fixtures. There's some big ones too. Manchester City versus Newcastle and Arsenal versus Chelsea. So don't move early until you know how those players fare after those fixtures. But ultimately, game week 22, it's all about Chelsea versus Brentford. Why? Because we are pitting a team in Chelsea who has a new manager and they're looking to do new things with their assets that we should be looking at because they have such a great fixture run in a few game weeks. We all want Cole Palmer back. We want to look at Enzo Fernandez, Chalobah, who's in my FPL team. There's so many assets, Sanchez in the goalkeeping position that we want to take a look at. But the whole view there is also, let's stop. The team that they're playing is Brentford. And as you'll see as we go into this video, they're full of differentials, full of players, again, who are under 10% owned, who have been producing well, like a Collins with double-digit returns from the defender spot. And obviously everyone who has Igor Thiago, who I sold for Bowen, and that was a big mistake. So ultimately, when we're looking at why this even matchup is relevant, it's quite surprising. Because Brentford, I thought they'd be in a relegation battle. And I also talked about that in my last video on the channel where their coach, Keith Andrews, has done a fantastic job. They're fifth in the league right now. And the reason why I thought they'd be in a relegation battle was because they lost almost 40 goals from Brian Mbeumo, who went to Manchester United, and Johan Wissa, who went to Newcastle. Those guys scored almost 40 goals. So many teams, if you took 40 goals out of them, they would be nowhere near where they are. So two players, almost 40 goals, and look where they are. They've done well. They have Igor Thiago, who's banging in the goals. He's second in the Golden Boot race, a race where we all thought Haaland would run away with it. It's becoming a lot closer as each game week passes. He's had 5 goals in the last 2 games. He looks fantastic. They have Collins, a player that I've had for many game weeks in my team, and I've benched him in one double-digit haul. And I did another video on benching mistakes there. We all make them. It happens. But he looks good. And he's he's only 5 million and he's a differential. Lewis Potter, a player who scored 21 points in a game week. Schade, their midfielder, a player who's had a hat trick already. And also they have Outtara who's coming back from AFCON. They have all these players. Kelleher, a goalie, the backup at Liverpool last season, who I didn't really rate and I didn't think was such a solid pick. He's still 4.5 million just sitting there to be taken, and he's one of the top scoring goalkeepers in the league. All of their players outside of Igor Thiago are differentials and, under players who are under 10% owned. So these are the types of players I love playing with because no one else has them and they're great ways to jump up the ranks. We're going to have a little bit of analysis when we look at their top assets in each of these positions: goalkeeper, defense, midfielder, and forward. So we're going to take a look at that and compare that to the Chelsea assets. So why aren't we looking at Brentford? Why aren't we loading up on Brentford assets? That's a question I think we need to answer. So switching back gears and looking at Chelsea, where is Chelsea? In the video I did on my last video, I talked about how, they've had such a long season, major injuries. They're on their second manager this season, lots of change, lots of new players. This is the Chelsea way. And it's something that, has to be studied in terms of, are they going to be able to put success and results? But I will also show you how, they have some assets that have been performing extremely well. Chalobah, who's, the 4th highest scoring defender in FPL. If I were to say that before the beginning of the season, not many people would have believed me, but here he is. They have Enzo Fernandez, who's playing extremely well and just doing everything you need to do. When Cole Palmer has been out, he's been taking penalties, just consistent, strong performance after performance. And the XG, community loves him because he hits all those metrics there. He's only 6.4 or 6.5 million. So these are players you need to target. And then, of course, you're thinking of also Palmer, right? Cole Palmer, who, a lot of people, especially in socials, are down on Bukayo Saka. You can make almost a direct swap from Saka to Palmer, going from a player who's Saka, who's a little over 20%, to a player in Cole Palmer, who's at 13%, and looking to get those upside because the fixtures look that good. However, we need to take a look at how these two players and their top assets compare. And that's what we're going to do now as we look at which team you should be investing in, whether that be Chelsea or Brentford. So the original premise with Chelsea assets was we needed to load up on them on this fixture run. And they have a lot of great assets, right? So, when we take a look at this chart, we have Sanchez, who's, done an admirable job at, giving them consistency in the back from the goalie perspective. Chalobah, who, is really not picked up enough, under 20% owned in terms of how many points he has. You'd think a lot of people would be loading up on him. That run may start, but obviously with the new manager, we don't know the minutes there. You have Enzo Fernandez, who's been a stalwart in that team. When Cole Palmer's been out, he's been taking penalties. He's one of the darlings for XG, and he's been always up there. Cole Palmer, of course, has to be included because everyone wants Cole Palmer, given how he's, a 200 plus per season FPL player and gets, bonus points on penalties and, just makes their team overall better, makes them click, makes them more dangerous. And then João Pedro, who was leading, scoring so much in the beginning of the season, he's totally run out of favor, but people still are looking at him as he's a cheap forward option. And then that is not even talking about, defensively, there's also Reece James, who's had a nice, strong season, and also Cucurella as well in the defender categories. So these are some of the top owned players I have on Chelsea. So we're going to take a look at these players in comparison to the Brentford players. And, Brentford, again, all of their players that you're going to find on this chart outside of Thiago are differentials, under 10% owned. It's incredible the value you're getting. You have a Kelleher at 4.5 million, who's one of the top scoring goalkeepers. You have Collins at 5 million and what he's doing with double-digit hauls, over 30 plus points over the last few game weeks. Like, he's really putting up those numbers that a lot of us had thought that he could get more goals, and he has been now, and now he's in the bonus as well. You have great midfield options outside of Schade, who's at 7.1 million. You have Dango Outtara, who's coming back from AFCON, and look at his numbers when he was in the squad. They're quite favorable to Schade. So it's like, save the extra money and go with him because he had been integral for Thiago scoring all those penalties because of him getting in those positions and Thiago just, finishing in the box from the penalty spot. And then Igor Thiago, the only player in Brentford who's not a differential, who most people have, and he has 16 goals in the Golden Boot race, like I mentioned. And we're looking to add on to his record for Brazilian goals in the Premier League at 16. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, what team do I want to invest moving forward? In the short term, yes, Brentford has a more difficult fixture run, but every team has played each other at least once. Every team has learned about every team. And so I don't necessarily think a hard fixture run should sway you if you think you can still get points with players, because at the end of the day, a player in form can beat a fixture run. Players, and I said this in my first video, good players can find ways to score in more difficult fixtures, and that happens all the time. And when a good player performs in a more difficult fixture, most likely they're going to probably be in the bonus. So they're going to have, an outstanding performance to help your FPL team. So that shouldn't dissuade you. The other thing we need to take a look at is when you look at the surrounding players, I'm just looking at the top percent owned for both these teams. But when you look at the surrounding players on both of these squads, there's lots of value to be found there. And for Brentford, it just keeps going on and on for defenders picks and, midfielder picks. I haven't really mentioned Damsgaard or Yarmouk, who you can see here and see their stats. So it's quite interesting as you keep going deeper. They have a deep, strong squad that's playing well, and is coached obviously well, and plays the type of football, right, that is attractive and does lead to FPL points because they take chances and they go for it. So at the end of the day, you do have these great choices of like, which team do I invest in? What should I take a look at? And I hope you found some of that valuable as you look at this fixture, this game week in Chelsea versus Brentford. Now let's take a look at how the team did in game week 21. Game week 21, it was sort of like a bounce back game week. I haven't had a lot of faith in a lot of these game weeks since the holiday fixtures because is you're just trying to survive them almost. Green arrows are nice. I got a small green arrow up to 2.6k overall, 62 points. And I actually got surprised to the upside with a few things. So when I take a look at the team, Henderson got me 7 points, which was surprising. They do play Villa strongly. They have a good record against them, but I could have seen a Morgan Rogers goal or something happening there, and lucky that didn't happen. Chalobah and Chelsea versus Fulham, 3-pointers, a little bit of DEFCON there. Chelsea is not really firing right now. So, like I said, in the last segment, you have to take a look at it. Are they should be investing in the defender he's going to be facing this game week? 13 points. Collins, another strong performance. They're doing so well, Brentford, and they're finding a groove for sure. And then Gabriel had the 6-pointer in a disappointing 0-0 draw with Liverpool. Expected more from that game from Arsenal, weren't able to attack. And Liverpool didn't have a shot in the game for the first time in 600 matches. So, definitely deserved on both ends a draw. In the midfield position, the thing you'll see, no returns. No returns at all from Rodgers, Rice, Saka, and Foden. We can really, skip all that and get to the forward line where we had a little bit more success. Bowen on a 2-pointer. Jared Bowen is not looking like a good pick, guys. He's not doing enough. And before the FA Cup game, he wrote a little thing in the paper, to get people on their side that they're working hard. But I'm not sure that things are going to turn there. So he's definitely on my mind as we look at transfer plans, which we'll look at later in the week on what to do there. And then ultimately, DCL, who has had this renaissance comeback season, 8-pointer in a really thrilling game at Newcastle. Unfortunately, they are hard done by with that penalty by Aronson. It happens so much, and I hate penalties like that when they get given. I hope you guys are on my team like that as well. Like, you put your hand up, and was it intentional? Who knows? But it's just a horrible way to sort of lose the momentum of that game and then ultimately lose the game. Not from that goal, but the goal that they scored on the last kick of the game by Harvey Barnes. And then Haaland, he got a goal in the game, finally broke his streak of not scoring, but lost a bonus point. So the people like myself who think you can go against Haaland, again, another reason too. And then we all know they have a defensive injury crisis going on right now with Diaz and Garvidal out. So something to consider as you move forward and the City fixtures change as they get a lot harder in the next couple game weeks with away games to Liverpool and Tottenham, and also this week's, away game, but they're in Manchester against United. And then the bench, not much happened on the bench. We have Dubravka there, 3-pointer, Ballard, Malin, who's my little surprise pick, as we'll see in the video my next video for the team selection later this week. And then Ruben Diaz, who's an injury doubt. I only have one free transfer, so we'll see what my plans are, and we'll talk about that more later in this week. But now let's also get to the headliner of what's going on at Manchester United. Let's take a look and have a quick think about what's happening over there now. 111 years. Manchester United is only going to play 40 games this season, bounce out of the, Carabao Cup and the FA Cup this past weekend. And, it's so crazy because this is Manchester United. They're one of the biggest brands on this planet next to Real Madrid, Barcelona. They're in the top 3. There's no doubt about that. Everyone knows Manchester United, global iconic brand across the world, and it's a brand and a team that I've been following since I've been watching FPL football for over 20 plus years. The challenge they have is twofold. They recruit players who are past their prime and expect them to be prime players, which is a bad philosophy and never works. And then they also have the challenge of they just keep not being able to make the right decisions and to have the right philosophies. And they really lost the essence of who they are as a club, right? The Manchester United I grew up watching was about the academy. They're about star players, but also academy players. They turn players into stars. If you look at the current Arsenal team, the team that's leading the league, the best team in the league, how many of those players were stars before they came to Arsenal? Not that many. Arteta has done a great job, whether you like him or not, of building a squad of players that suit how he wants to play and making them better. Bukayo Saka has gotten better. Martinelli, you know, when they picked, and I'm talking about when they picked these players up, have gotten better. And it goes on and on and on. David Raya, who he, you know, put in, and we didn't think Raya was such a top goalkeeper when they had Ramsdale. He's gotten better. And so, you know, Ben White, you know, Urian Timber, you know, Gabriel, who we bought him for 30 million pounds and no one really thought much of him. But this isn't about Arsenal, okay? It's about Manchester United. But similarly, as a Manchester United fan, who can you say you've brought, you know, in the last, you know, 5 years, 3 years that you've made better? We all saw how Amarim has, you know, not played the youngsters. There's still lots of talent there, but, you know, you let Rashford go, who's extremely obviously talented, and he's having a fantastic season at Barcelona. You know, he has his issues. Every player does. No player is perfect. The whole view is, what is Manchester United doing to make their players better? Because the other side of it is on the transfer market, you know, you're paying exorbitant fees for players who are past their prime. And everyone knows, because of what I said earlier, they're one of the biggest brands. So Manchester United is going to pay top dollar for these players because they know they can get it from a team like that makes so much money. So I know a lot of Manchester United fans are frustrated. You know, it isn't a manager issue in my view. It's not, you know, they've been chopping and changing managers for Sir Alex Ferguson. You know, it's not the manager, it's upstairs. I think if you're a Manchester United fan, you probably agree that change needs to happen upstairs. And I really hope for you guys, as you look at the Manchester Derby and you look at the games that you need to play for, this is one. So hopefully they can start, get a result in that, make the most of their season, try and climb out into the Champions League or at least Europa League places, because Manchester United is a brand that can't fail like this. If you like this video, please subscribe and like below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.